Good morning, YouTube, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when I actually get around to posting this. But it is morning right now, and yeah, the weather's taken a recent turn. It's been hot and beautiful for most of July, but recently there's been a ton of thunderstorms and stuff, so that kind of turned me more indoors. And I figured, well, I got some stuff I got up to, so why not post about it now? So first thing, we watched this movie a short while back, The Tooth Fairy, starring Dwayne Johnson, also known as The Rock. It's just a goofy family movie. The Rock plays a professional, not NHL, a hockey player named Derek Thompson, also known as the Tooth Fairy. His punishing hits pop the teeth right out of opposing players' mouths, and that's why he has earned that moniker. And basically, he comes out for a few shifts a game, rails somebody, sits in the box for a while, and just enjoys kind of being a fan favorite for doing all of the rough stuff. So he's dating a woman named Carly who has two children in a separate relationship, young Tess and then an older son named Randy. Tess loves Derek, Randy not so much. And one night when he's got some guys from the team over playing poker, Tess has a tooth under her pillow for the Tooth Fairy to get some cash, and Derek runs out of money during the poker game, takes the money from under her pillow, forgets to replace it. She wakes up freaking out, and he's on the verge of telling her there is no Tooth Fairy when Carly saves the day and saves the situation, and then she tells Derek to just go home because he doesn't get to decide when her kids' childhood fantasies end. And later that night, he has a nightmare about becoming a Tooth Fairy, and he wakes up, goes, phew, it was only a dream, and then he sprouts some wings. So he has been called by the Tooth Fairy Council to do 2 weeks of Tooth Fairy service for being a dream killer, and he is mentored by a goofy, tall-looking guy named Tracy, who's played by Stephen Merchant from the British Office fame, who I find very funny. And so he guides him through this process of being the Tooth Fairy for his 2 weeks. And of course, Derek is totally resistant to this idea and doesn't take well to it, has a bad attitude. At the same time, he's trying to patch things up with Carly. He's trying to build a relationship with Randy. And a new hotshot rookie has come up on the hockey team who has kind of stolen his thunder. And his career is in question as well. So, of course, throughout this journey, he learns a lesson or two or three and comes out the better for it. And it's a pretty funny movie. It's kind of, like I said, it's a goofy family movie. But The Rock just has that way of making things even funnier than they are, sort of thing, his charisma and stuff. So it's worth the watch. It's nothing, to most critics and people will probably pan it, but that's the way those family movies go. But I enjoyed it for what it is. Next thing up, I recently also finished reading the 6th book in the Expanse series called Babylon's Ashes. As this one starts out, Marco Inaros, the tyrant, has built up his free navy and is now intercepting ships that are trying to head through the ring gates to go to all the new planets that the proto-molecule has allowed humanity to access. He's taking all their cargo and basically not allowing any sort of development to happen. In the meantime, he's also dumping asteroids onto Earth and causing much catastrophe down there, and many hundreds and thousands of deaths, millions of deaths. And so James Holden and the crew of the Rocinante, if that's how you say it, are kind of wanting to fight back against him. And so they kind of team up with Michio Pa, who is actually a captain under Marco's regime, and she finds that she can't stand his strong-handed tactics anymore and kind of defects from him. Not that she's exactly accepted by Earth and Mars in those forces as an ally just yet, but they start kind of doing some operations together. And the first thing is to take Sarah's station, which Marco seemingly abandons for purposes only known to him. And then eventually they want to set up a meeting with Fred Johnson, the former leader of the OPA, or I guess he's still a leader at that point, with a bunch of random factions that supported the OPA and want to see if they can come up with a plan for becoming allies and fighting back against Marco. The only problem is when Holden and his crew are transporting Fred Johnson to his to this secret meeting, they get engaged with Marco's forces, and during the fighting, Fred Johnson has a heart attack and dies, and that leaves Holden as the guy running this meeting and trying to figure out a plan. And eventually a plan is settled upon, and the plan is to go after Medina Station, the station right at the ring gate that controls all the passage going through the gate. It's mounted with a number of rail guns, so they figure if they can come up with a plan to disable the rail guns and take the station and take it over, they will then be in control of the situation and be able to fight back against Marco, control the ring gate, get help through to people who need it, and make sure supplies are going where they need to go, and so forth. So it's a desperate plan, and will it work? So very fast-paced story, this one. Not a lot of sitting around. It's mostly action and stuff. So yeah, it's the series is really well done. It's written in a really realistic way about like what life would actually be like in outer space and aboard a ship and a space station and stuff. So it's kind of neat. It's a different perspective seeing a series of books written that way. Next thing, I just finished this the other day. I saw this in the store and I couldn't resist. It's called A Babysitter's Guide to Monster Hunting, and apparently it's going to be a Netflix film soon as well. A 13-year-old named Kelly Ferguson is trying to save up to go to camp in the summertime. She's been working different jobs and doing different chores to build up this money because she knows her parents can't necessarily afford it. And one night her mom comes home, and Kelly has been talking about maybe becoming a babysitter to earn the extra cheese that she needs. And her mom's boss, who they dubbed the Ice Queen, happens to call and then needs a sitter for her 5-year-old son Jacob, and whose normal sitter is not available. So her mom kind of guarantees that Kelly will be there, and she's horrified because not only will she have to go babysit her mom's boss's son, she's going to miss a special Halloween party which her crush Victor is going to be at. And she's kind of not an outcast, but not one of the popular kids, so she's trying to get in with that crowd. So the party was pretty important to her. But anyways, she goes to the house to babysit Jacob. They don't see eye to eye at first. He just wants his old sitter. He wants to eat junk food. He doesn't want to go to bed because of the nightmares. But eventually Kelly kind of calms him down and gives him what he wants, and eventually reads him some stories. He falls asleep. And then she starts hearing some ruckuses, and eventually goes into the bedroom, and there's a couple of little troll-type creatures that have come up from the floor underneath Jacob's bed and are trying to kidnap him. And eventually they do. So she freaks out, goes and finds the contact information for Jacob's regular sitter, Liz, who shows up soon afterwards, and is this a girl who's maybe a couple years older than her, with blue hair and a chippy attitude. And so she Kelly tags along with her, and bit by bit starts to realize that monsters are real, and they just kidnapped Jacob, who was under her care, and so now she's determined to get this child back. So soon they go to this babysitter guild's headquarters, and she meets a few other outcasts from school that she always kind of made fun of, not really, but kind of, and realizes that they're also babysitters under this guild and have all this training and knowledge of these monsters and stuff. And so as the whole adventure unfolds, they visit this party that Kelly was supposed to go to because one of the monsters shows up there. Then they go to the cat lady's house and have a big adventure there. And it gets worse and worse. And it turns out the head cheese of the monsters, the Grand Guignon or something like that, otherwise known as the Boogeyman, is going to use Jacob to try and bring nightmare creatures to the earth forever. Like, he's going to proliferate them all across the earth. So it's up to these kids to stop that from happening. So really cool book, really fast paced, really interesting. It's a monster story. Who doesn't like a good monster story, right? So like that very much. Next thing, we recently finished playing this piece of crap. for the Wii. Ben 10 Omniverse 2. We played the original Ben 10 Omniverse, and it was amazing. A two-player co-op game that was just like an action game. You strolled through the levels, beat up the bad guys, accomplished your objectives, and it was fun. It was good. It was a normal kind of game. In this game, a species called the Incursions have kind of taken over Earth, and Ben finds himself tucked aboard one of their spaceships, and he kind of has to stay covert and sabotage it, and then get down to Earth and try and stop these guys from doing too much damage. And but the way the game unfolds is that you're running through the hall or the corridors of the ship, and Ben's always running. You don't control his pace. You just control which lane he's in and which alien he turns into, because there's obstacles throughout the corridors that are specific to the heavy, middle, or light style of aliens, and you have to flip between them and stuff. And then every once in a while you'll come to a room where you do a little bit of battle, but it's very confined, and it's very repetitive. The game's short. The controls don't respond very well. It's impossible to flip between the aliens when you really need to. Like, it was just, after the first game, I just questioned, why the hell would you do this to the second game? It's just a giant piece of shit. I gave it a 3 on my GameSpot rating, but and I give it a lot of 10s. Like, if I really like a game, I have no problem giving it a 10. So to give a game a 3 for me is like a big deal, and this game is definitely a 3. So now on the other end of the spectrum, I don't have the case because it was one of the free PS Plus games a couple months ago, but Overcooked. Insanely fun game. It's 4-player. The story is that the Onion Kingdom is being attacked by this monster, which is made of spaghetti and meatballs. It's devouring everything in sight. So this wise old onion sends you back in time, you being a chef, and you have to travel across all these lands to hone your cooking skills. So you have to work together with either a second player that you control as well if you're playing by yourself, or any other human-controlled players, up to 4 in total, to cook different dishes in every level's a different kitchen too. There's different obstacles, there's different scenarios, and you have to hone your cooking skills, get all your dishes out as fast as possible, and improve your skills until you're eventually ready to face the beast and sate his appetite and save the Onion Kingdom. There's lots of different things you make. There's lots of different, like, you have to chop, you have to deep fry, you have to fry, you have to cook pizza in the oven. Like, there's salad, burgers, burritos, fish and chips, pizza, soup is a big one. So there's all these different processes you have to go through to cook each dish, and it's just, at first I was kind of like, well, this is a weird game. And then we played a couple levels, and I was like, oh my god, I'm hooked. We just kept playing it and playing it and playing it, and recently I just downloaded Overcooked 2 to our Switch, so we'll hopefully be starting that at some point in the next, month or two or whatever. So yeah, so that, unlike Ben 10 Omniverse 2, which is a total piece of shit, Overcooked is a complete 10. So fun. Anybody should love that game. If you don't, there's something wrong with you. Last couple entries recently. Listened to a couple of CDs. First one, the Icon entry from the band, like a greatest hits package. I'd heard a number of their songs for years and years. They're old, like 60s, 70s sort of thing. The Wait, Upon Cripple Creek, and Ophelia. If those 3 songs, just Google them and you'll go, oh yes, I've heard this a million times. I always thought they were like a Southern American band, because that's kind of their sound. They got like accordions and fiddles and not a banjo, but something that sounds like a banjo. And a lot of their lyrics are too about going down the Mississippi and stuff like that. So they have a very Southern U.S. kind of vibe. And then when I Googled them after this to write a review on my blog, they're from Canada. They're from like Toronto or something like that. So it was like, whoa. So I found that amazing because their sound was so not Canadian. But it's just a chill vibe. I love those 3 songs from when I was a kid, and then when I got this and listened to all their other stuff that they offered, the rest of it's just as good. So if you only ever just listen to a greatest hits from them, I would say just do it. If you're looking for something chill and kind of something to smoke something to, that would be a really good option. And then the last CD, Megadeth's Youthanasia. Released in 1994, it was their 6th studio album and came right after Countdown to Extinction, which is their biggest album of all time in terms of sales and popularity. Countdown kind of, like, I always liken them to Metallica in a way. Like, Metallica's first 4 albums were amazing thrash metal, and then they released their self-titled one, the black one, and their sound then kind of switched to heavy metal more and not really any thrash. And that album was still good, but then what came after it just kind of degraded, and there's like 2 different phases of Metallica, and the first one's really good, like amazing, and what came after is not so good. Megadeth kind of did the same sort of transformation. Countdown was kind of the start of it, I guess, and then Youthanasia was kind of the finishing of it. But unlike Metallica, their sound didn't get worse. It just got different. It just evolved, and it's a different sound. It's a different kind of look. Still some elements of thrash, but more metal than anything. But I like it. It's not like Metallica where you go, oh, okay, I'm only going to listen to the first 4 albums, and whatever, all the stuff that came after is kind of the black sheep of the family, right? It's like Megadeth, it doesn't matter. Just put on any CD, anytime. It's great. And that's what this is. It's, I remember this coming out, and I was going to get it back when it came out, and of course, back then, there was so much good music in the 90s, it just kind of, it didn't happen. Even though I knew a couple of the songs here and there, but getting it all these years later and listening to it all the way through, it's just as solid as anything else. Like I said, a different evolving kind of sound, but you can't go wrong. So, yeah, so that's it. I've got more stuff coming, of course. Like I said, how often I post this stuff kind of depends on the weather, because I like to be outside as much as possible during this time of year, in the pool, on the bike, lying in the sun, actually getting some color on this pasty white skin. So, yeah, but if the weather trends this way, I should be back sooner than later, but I hope it doesn't, but I guess we'll see. Until then, have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you soon.